What? Yeah! What? What? شو هاد؟ انا ما بعرف شو اللي صار، انا كنت عم بتصيد، سمعت في حريقه والعه، دورت وبدي فل على بيتي وسمعت شيء فقع، وصار اللي صار، وصلت وما عاد تعرفت شيء، هذا هو اللي بعد.
ما حصل اليوم لن يمر من دون حساب. سيدفع المسؤولون عن هذه الكارثة الثمن. هذا وعد للشهداء وللجرحى. هذا التزام وطني. ستكون هناك حقائق تعلن عن هذا المستودع الخطير الموجود منذ العام 2014.
Call Halayim, La Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Wahara Kakadash, all praises and glory go to you, Lord. Double honors and respect to the apostles, elders, and men of Great Millstone, from which I've learned all of this truth, and I'm so thankful. To you, I say Shalom. Today I begin my lesson. It is going to be about Jacob's trouble, but I am going to begin in Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 2. As you've seen, a few things happened recently. The apostles called this the year of prophecy, and it has not been anything short of disappointing. Now, I begin today in Wisdom of Solomon chapter 2, and we're going to start at verse 1. It says, "For the ungodly said, reasoning with themselves, but not aright, our life is short and tedious, and in the death of a man there is no remedy. Neither was there any man known to have returned from the grave." And that is very much that YOLO spirit. The rulers of this life, we're going to call them Uncle E. They have reasoned within themselves that there's no cure of death, and death very much has a cure. Not only that, it's no YOLO. You don't live once. You live more than once. It's reincarnation. But these are all lessons that are far more than the time I have to express right now, and maybe not even the knowledge yet, so I won't even touch the subject. However, to give you just a base of this idea that you only live once and that you should have every joy that you need right now, to me, my opinion is just ignorance. Continuing on. "For we are born at all adventure, and we shall be hereafter as though we had never been. For the breath in our nostrils is as smoke, and a little spark in the moving of our heart.
Initial information indicates highly explosive material was to blame for the fire and blast that followed. State television is specifically reporting the presence of sodium nitrate. Lebanon's prime minister spoke this evening saying there will be a price to pay and that someone will be held responsible. Images from Beirut show broken glass and splintered buildings across the city. Rescue crews continue to search for survivors at this hour. Hospitals are flooded with patients who have wounds from debris caused by the explosion. The Lebanese Red Cross has put out a desperate call for blood donations. New pictures even show people being treated in the parking lot of the city's largest hospital. The blast was felt 140 miles away in Cyprus and registered as the equivalent of a 4.5 magnitude earthquake. The international community is reacting tonight. Israel is offering aid to Lebanon despite security tension between the two countries. We're also seeing aid being offered by France, Iran, and the UK, among others. This couldn't come at a worse time for the country. We've been covering the ongoing economic disaster in Lebanon. The economy is crumbling. There are many people who are hungry, and there are now bodies in the streets of Beirut. Mike?
This is the wisdom of Solomon, chapter 2, and verse 4. And our name shall be forgotten in time, and no man shall have our works in remembrance, and our life shall pass away as the trace of a cloud. And there shall be a disbursement as mist, dispersed, Salakia, and shall be dispersed as a mist that is driven away with the beams of the sun, and overcome with the heat thereof. Verse 5, for our time is a very shadow that passeth away, and after our end there is no returning, for it is fast sealed, so that no man cometh again. And again, they reason with themselves that they only live once, and obviously this is evident in verse 7. Let us fill ourselves with costly wine and ointments, and let no flower of the spring pass by us. Let us crown ourselves with rosebuds before they be withered. Verse 9. Let none of us go up without his part of our voluptuousness. Let us leave tokens of our joyfulness in every place, for this is our portion, and our lot is this.
The military is planning an unprecedented training exercise this summer called Operation Jade Helm 15 across 7 states. And with polls showing trust in the government near record lows, that exercise has some Americans feeling uneasy. Jennifer Wishon brings us that story.
Have you heard of this military special operations command exercise called Jade Helm?
Speculation about why the military wants to train in American communities instead of military bases is fueling a growing number of theories across the internet and social media.
The government will take action when it thinks its authority is threatened.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott has even asked his National Guard to monitor it. So what is Jade Helm 15? It's realistic military training taking place simultaneously in 7 states, from Southern California to Texas. Over 8 weeks, the nation's elite special forces will practice unconventional warfare by operating outside their normal support systems, adapting to new terrain, and working with civilians to gain their trust. When news of the operation broke, the phones inside Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert's office lit up.
At first, people were not sure what to think. Do we have to worry about martial law? Is our federal government coming in and going to practice imposing martial law on Texas?
A former Army captain, Gohmert says he understands the need for training, yet it bothers him that as part of the exercise, the military is labeling Texas, Utah, and Southern California as hostile.
This is actually taking areas of our home country, the United States, and saying Texas is hostile, Utah is hostile, Southern California is hostile, and we got to take it back from the hostiles.
And he thinks it's no coincidence that the Jade Helm 15 map looks an awful lot like the 2012 political map. So-called hostile states are colored red. The suspicion surrounding Jade Helm 15 is fueled by the fact that a vast majority of Americans simply don't trust the government.
Fierce blowback and calls for an investigation after reports that federal officers are pulling Portland protesters into unmarked vans. The reports raise various questions. Among them, are the feds driving unmarked vehicles? The video suggests, yes, they are driving an unmarked van, which is not uncommon for federal law enforcement. But a former U.S. Attorney for Oregon under the Obama administration says transparency is critical.
Recognize the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Bass, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Between 1956 and 1971, the FBI ran a counterintelligence program named COINTELPRO that was initiated by J. Edgar Hoover. COINTELPRO mainly targeted civil rights leaders such as Martin Luther King, and it's commonly understood that this was an abuse of its surveillance power in a manner to suppress a peaceful movement. So I would like to ask, Mr. Chair, unanimous consent to enter this report into the record, which is Black identity extremists likely motivated to target law enforcement officers. I believe earlier you said you were not familiar with the report. Is that correct?
Well, I haven't read it. I know some of the alleged targeting of officers by
okay, so I would like to know, and I'll ask you about that in a minute. So you are somewhat familiar with it. Who had the power in your department to order a report like this?
I'm not sure how that report got ordered. I don't believe I explicitly approved it or directed it.
Okay, so you haven't necessarily read the report, but you are familiar with the term Black identity extremists?
Well, I think so, yes.
So could you tell me what that term means to you? Do you believe that there is a movement of African Americans that identify themselves as Black identity extremists, and what does that movement do?
Well, I'd be interested to see the conclusions of that report, but I'm aware that there are groups that do have an extraordinary commitment to their racial identity, and some have transformed themselves even into violent activists.
Are you aware of white organizations that do this as well? Given that white supremacy is well-documented, well-researched movements such as the neo-Nazis, the Ku Klux Klan, etc., are they white identity extremists?
I didn't follow that question. Please, again.
Is there a term or a report on white identity extremists? You mentioned you were familiar with Black people who identify with their racial identity.
Yes, but it's not coming to me at this moment.
Not coming to you?
It's
certainly a group such as the Ku Klux Klan.
Yes, and then the skinhead movements, but there's a racial identity white movements that have been identified for sure.
So has the FBI done a report on white identity extremists that are likely motivated to target law enforcement officers? Is there such
I'm not aware of that.
Okay, are you aware of a group called the Sovereign Citizens?
I've heard that group, yes.
And I believe that the Sovereign Citizens is primarily a white organization that absolutely has targeted police officers and killed police officers. You're not aware of that?
I'm not aware of all their crimes, but I know they're a group that's known to have violent tendencies.
Could you name an African-American organization that have committed violent acts against police officers? Could you name one today? In this report, they name organizations from 30, 40 years ago, but can you name of one today that has targeted police officers in a violent manner?
I believe I could, but I would want to be to confirm that and submit it to you in writing. But I believe we had, within the last year or so, 4 police officers killed by a group that some have described as extremists.
So what has happened is that there have been a couple of incidents in which African Americans did kill police officers who were not associated with a Black organization. And so one, for example, in Baton Rouge was associated with Sovereign Citizens, which is primarily a white group. So you should know that there's a lot of concern in the community, especially from organizations such as Black Lives Matter. By the way, would you consider Black Lives Matter a Black identity extremist group?
I'm not able to comment on that. I have not so declared it.
So you should know that a lot of activists around the country are very concerned that we're getting ready to repeat a very sad chapter of our history, where people who are rightfully protesting what they consider to be an injustice in their community, which is their relationship with police officers, are now being targeted and labeled as extremists and are going through periods of surveillance and harassment. And so I would like to know, what is your department going to do to protect the rights of average citizens to protest if they have a concern about police officers.
This department will not unlawfully target people.
So if that's the case, then I would ask that you review this report, Black Identity Extremists Likely Motivated to Target Law Enforcement Officers, because I personally don't believe that any such organizations exist. The organizations that are referred to in this report are organizations from decades ago.
Verse 10, let us oppress the poor righteous man. Let us not spare the widow, nor reverence the ancient gray hairs of the aged. Verse 11, let our strength be the law of justice, for that which is feeble is found to be nothing worth. Verse 12, therefore let us lie in wait for the righteous, because he is not for our turn, and he is clean contrary to our doings. He upbraideth us with offending of the law, and objected to our infamy the transgressings of our education. Verse 13, he professeth to have knowledge of God, and he calleth himself the child of Yahweh. Verse 14, he was made to reprove our thoughts. And don't you think for 1 second, Akim, he's not talking about the prophets. Okay? The Lord is clearly telling you that the wicked, this is what his thoughts are of you. You know what I mean? They lay in wait. And I once heard that system equals pits. Pits is, you put up pits laying in wait for animals to come along, or enemies for that matter. So they put all these pits around you, these systems, the education system, the child support system, the criminal justice system. These are all these pits that they've laid in snare for the righteous, and also for the wicked for that matter. These are all caught to get you in this web that you can never get out of. And when they lay in wait, this is what they're doing. And why do they do this on the level that they do? Because they can't stand you. Because you are not for him, clean contrary to his doings, upbraideth with offending of the law, and objected to the infamy of transgressing of our educations. They don't want you teaching what's right. They don't want you doing what's right. And at the end of the day, that's what Jacob's trouble is all about.
Another question, are the feds arresting people without probable cause? That's the claim. In an interview with OPB and the Washington Post, one Portland protester said he was searched and placed in a holding cell in the federal courthouse. He was later released with no record of his arrest. The U.S. Attorney's Office has asked for an independent review from the Office of Inspector General. Are the feds making arrests away from the U.S. courthouse? Yes. Court records indicate federal officers have spotted someone who committed a crime, then tracked them down elsewhere and made an arrest. And finally, who are these federal officers? Federal law enforcement, including the U.S. Marshals, Federal Protective Service, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and Homeland Security, were called in earlier this month from outside the area to help protect federal buildings in downtown Portland. On Thursday, the interim head of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security visited Portland.
So we need to make sure that we're supporting our law enforcement officers here and making sure that they're going to continue to protect the federal courthouse here. That's what the DHS does.
Homeland Security responded to the criticism with a statement explaining that federal officers seen in the video could be identified because they wore a Customs and Border Protection insignia.
Mr. Garner's death was a terrible tragedy. But having thoroughly investigated the surrounding circumstances, the department has concluded that the available evidence would not support federal civil rights charges against any officer.
A Charlotte-Mecklenburg police officer charged in the fatal shooting of an unarmed man.
Police officer who shot and killed an unarmed black man looking for help after a car accident. The officer charged with voluntary manslaughter. His lawyers say he was acting in self-defense.
It has happened. happened again. Just 9 days after the uproar in Ferguson, a grand jury in New York City has refused to indict yet another white police officer said to have killed an unarmed black man.
We got one message. Kill the killers, shoot them back, a body for a body. Get it straight. We ain't discriminate.
And so it is yet again in the U.S. City police with a black suspect followed by death and fury.
There were dramatic developments today involving the Baltimore police officers accused of causing a fatal injury to Freddie Gray, a man who died in their custody last year. After failing to secure guilty verdicts against 4 officers already brought to trial, prosecutors today dropped the charges against the remaining officers as the prosecutor suggested the legal system worked against her.
Samuel DuBose was shot in the head Sunday after being pulled over for a missing license plate.
A Cincinnati police officer has been indicted for the murder of an unarmed black man at a traffic stop.
Now those charges have been dismissed.
Why did he think I looked at him as a human being and I don't have hatred for him? I thought, why did he kill my brother? Why did he have hatred for my brother? I don't have any feelings for him, really, other than the fact that I think it's absurd that he's devastated without apologizing even for taking the life.
2 black men are dead after encounters with police in Minnesota and Louisiana.
Call for justice tonight for a man killed by police after federal investigators said they could not prosecute. The disturbing incident caught on video the officer struggling with Alton Sterling, taking him down, and then shots are heard.
The Louisiana Department of Justice cannot proceed with a prosecution .
That's where an officer opened fire on Philando Castile as he sat in the passenger seat of a car driven by his girlfriend with a child in the back.
Jurors found Yanez was reasonable in his decision to shoot and kill Philando Castile during a traffic stop last July. Officer Yanez was charged with manslaughter. The jury also found him not guilty in 2 other counts of endangering Philando Castile's girlfriend, Diamond Reynolds, and her child.
I told him to put his hands on the steering wheel. I told him to put his hands where I can see him. No, you did not. You said, I told him not to reach. Man, you was a stupid cop.
A police officer killed her neighbor, claiming she mistook his apartment for her own.
Ex-Dallas police officer Amber Geiger weeping on the stand, expressing remorse for killing her neighbor, at some points breaking down.
I ask God for forgiveness and I hate myself every single day. I feel like I don't deserve a chance to be with my family and friends. I wish he was the one with the gun that killed me.
This is going to be Jeremiah chapter 30. And we're going to begin at verse 5. And I'm just going to read down until it suits part. Now we are in the time of Jacob's trouble. This is evident as all the clips have been seen. You have seen them setting laws against you. You have seen them preparing to come down on you with great wrath. And this is what the Lord had to say about it long before we got here. So again, this is Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 5 is where I will begin. Now it says, For thus saith Yahweh, we have heard a voice of trembling, of fear, and not of peace. Verse 6, Ask ye now and see whether a man doth travail with child. Wherefore do I see every man with his hands on his loins, as a woman in travail, and all faces are turned into paleness. As you saw from the video clips previous, those people that were hit in Beirut were in travail. And this is only a precursor of what is about to hit us. America, Babylon the Great, has a lot to pay for. And the Lord is giving us signs to turn back to him, that he can protect you from what is coming. Yasha Allah. Don't let me get too emotional. Continuing on. This is Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 7. Alas, for the day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. And obviously the wicked have reasoned with themselves that no one is going to save us, but the Lord is clearly indicating here that he has our back, Yasha. So again, repent. But continuing on, I'm not at the end of this lesson because this is Jacob's trouble. We must know what is going to happen. So this is Jeremiah chapter 30 and verse 8. For it shall come to pass in that day, saith Yahweh of hosts, that I will break his yoke from off thy neck, and will burst thy bonds, and strangers will no more serve themselves of him. Now, if you're not understanding that you're a slave, I can't explain it to you in just this one video, but you are a slave. And this passage, this scripture, indicates that your slavery is about to come to an abrupt end. Continuing on, Jeremiah 30 and 9. But they shall serve Yahweh their God and David their king, whom I will raise up unto them. Verse 10. Therefore fear not, O my servant Jacob, saith Yahweh. Neither be dismayed, O Israel, for lo, I will save thee from afar, and thy seed from the land of their captivity. And Jacob shall return, and shall be in rest, and be quiet, and none shall make him afraid. And Lord Yahweh, I got to be honest with you, that verse just hits home because I'm so sick of being sick and tired. I don't want to be afraid. I don't want my children to be afraid. And I just can't wait until you make this passage come true. But continuing on, Jeremiah 30 and 11. For I am with thee, saith Yahweh, to save thee, though I will make a full end of all nations whither I have scattered thee. Yet will I not make a full end of thee, but I will correct thee in measure, and I will not leave thee altogether unpunished. 2/3 of you got to go, but a remnant shall be saved. And when they are saved, they will be corrected and measured, because all gold is tried in affliction, y'all. Continuing on. This is verse 12. For thus saith Yahweh, thy bruise is incurable, and thy wound is grievous. There is none to plead thy cause, that thou mayest be bound up. Thou hast no healing medicines. All thy lovers have forgotten thee. They seek thee not. For I have wounded thee with the wound of an enemy, with the chastisement of a cruel one, for the multitude of thine iniquity, because thy sins were increased. Hey, you break one law, you broke them all, and you probably have in multiple lives. Continuing on, this is Jeremiah 30 and 15. Why criest thou for thine affliction? Thy sorrow is incurable for the multitude of thine iniquity, because thy sins were increased. I have done these things unto thee. And therefore, all they that devour thee shall be devoured, and all thine adversaries, every one of them, shall go into captivity. And they that spoil thee shall be a spoil, and all they that prey upon thee will I give for a prey. This is Zechariah chapter 13, and we're going to begin at verse 7. Zechariah chapter 13 and verse 7. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the man that is my fellow, saith Yahweh of hosts. Smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered, and I will turn my hand upon the little ones. And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord, saith Yahweh, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die. 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the 3rd part shall be left therein. 2/3 have to go. It's just that simple. And I will bring the 3rd part through the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and I will try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I will say it is my people, and they shall say, Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai is my God. On that note, I say, Kal Halayim La Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai Waharek Al Kadash. All praises and glory go to you, Lord. Double honors and respect to the apostles, elders, and men of Great Millstone, from which I've learned all of this truth. To you I say Shalom.